What's better, Nintendo, PlayStation, or Xbox? What about PC? Oh boy. Always wants to be included. Console wars. No matter which side you picked, somehow the console that you picked is always the right choice, and then everyone else's was wrong. Maybe it was the games, the controllers, or the exclusives. We'll never know. And no matter how much time passes, each generation, gamers continue to pick sides. You see, console wars have been around all the way since the beginning. However, what really sparked this was the late 1980s and the early 90s. At the time, Nintendo was the king of gaming. The NES was everywhere. Mario had become a household name, and Nintendo basically held a monopoly on the gaming world. But then Sega showed up. And instead of trying to copy Nintendo, Sega positioned itself as a cooler and edgier console. This led to the most famous marketing campaigns in gaming history. Genesis does what Nintendo don't. And for the first time, gamers weren't just choosing sides. People were having arguments over graphics, game libraries, mascots, and even censorship in games. One of the most famous examples was Mortal Kombat, where Nintendo literally censored the game for violence and took away the blood. However, by the mid-90s, the console wars was no longer just Nintendo versus Sega. A new challenger entered the arena, and their name was Sony. What's interesting is that Sony wasn't originally supposed to become Nintendo's biggest rival. The two companies actually had worked together on a CD-based project before the partnership eventually fell off. Although rather than walking away from gaming industry altogether, Sony decided to continue forward on its own and created the original PlayStation. And that decision changed everything. Unlike Nintendo, which was still using cartridges, PlayStation used CDs. They were cheaper to manufacture and held more data, which made it easier for developers to create larger and more ambitious games. And with it, they gave Nintendo a run for their money. You know, I'll give it to Sony on this. While Nintendo really wasn't big on the accessories to add onto their consoles, Sony added one of my favorite ones, which is the little portable LCD screen that you would put on the console. And I remember seeing people bring that in the mall, school. You couldn't do that with Nintendo. You had to actually bring a whole TV. By the early 2000s, things started to change though. Gamers had more choices. Sony entered the generation with the PlayStation 2, a console that would basically become the greatest selling console of all time. It had a massive library, a built-in DVD player, which made it an easy household item to pick, considering that DVD players were really expensive back then. So you can get one that was rather affordable and a gaming console at the same time. It made perfect sense to have one. Although I do want to mention a console that always gets forgotten, and it is unfortunately the Sega Dreamcast. Released in 1999, the Dreamcast actually was ahead of its time in many ways. It featured online capabilities, unique games, and really innovative ideas that would later become much more common in gaming. Unfortunately for Sega, the Dreamcast arrived at a difficult moment. See, with the rise of the PlayStation 2 coming out, the Dreamcast was basically struggling to compete. Sega eventually made the decision to leave the console business altogether. And with Sega gone, the battlefield was now in set. However, Sony wouldn't have all the glory here because the new challenger was approaching: Microsoft's Xbox. At the time, many people saw Xbox as a newcomer. They never really took it seriously. But Xbox quickly found its identity through its very powerful hardware, solid online gaming, and one particular game that would become synonymous with the brand: Halo Combat Evolved. It was the reason to own an Xbox. Meanwhile, Nintendo took a different approach with the Nintendo GameCube. While it didn't sell as many units as its competitors, it did deliver on some fantastic games like Super Smash Bros. Melee, Metroid Prime, Mario Kart Double Dash, and of course, The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. Now, one thing to mention, while the PlayStation did have DVD support, the Xbox did also have that. The only thing that was weird is that it included this add-on that you had to plug into the console to actually make you play the DVD. I mean, I owned an Xbox and I always remember that I had to buy that little adapter to just play DVDs when the PlayStation already had that fully installed. I don't know, it's kind of a cash grab, and I feel like it would help Xbox better if they never included that in there. Nintendo, on the other hand, well, you know how it is. Nintendo always likes to be different, and so they opted out with having these smaller optical discs in a way to almost limit piracy in a sense, but that also made it harder for developers to develop games for that console. And of course, it didn't have the capabilities to play DVD movies. But I would say in this generation, it's when both of these three giants were the most similar at the time. You know what's interesting? Mascots for video games. If you look at Nintendo, you obviously think Mario. If you think of Xbox, you think of Master Chief. PlayStation, I don't know. I mean, it's not Crash Bandicoot anymore. It's not Spyro. It's not Sly Cooper. I mean, they left that franchise dead for some reason. And they don't use Kratos like that. It's almost like they don't really have an identity of themselves. I mean, I guess you can count Astro Boy as the newest one, although I will say by the time the 7th generation console started, this is when the console wars really got crazy. I would say it surpassed anything at the time. Microsoft struck first on the Xbox 360 in 2005, and it launched before all of its competitors, giving it a huge advantage for many gamers, and so the Xbox 360 became the place to play the new gen at the time. Xbox Live was becoming the gold standard of online gaming. Party chat was implemented now, so you can play with people together, and achievements gave players a new reason to keep playing games. Of course, the console exclusives were like Halo 3, Gears of War, Forza Motorsport, and Fable helped build the platform's identity. But the 360 wasn't perfect. Due to trying to rush the console out to production, the infamous Red Ring of Death. Hardware failures became so common that this became one of the biggest crises in gaming history. And trust me, I was there. I had 2 Xboxes and they all broke. Then of course was Sony releasing the PlayStation 3. And at that time, Sony was basically the king of gaming. And so they thought to themselves, well, people can afford this premium pricing, and they upcharged customers due to the console being manufactured into this very unique and powerful supercell, which unfortunately ended up hurting Sony even more because it made it harder for developers to work on the games for that console. And so lots of the games that would be on the 360 and on the PlayStation 3 ended up looking better on the 360 just because it was easier to develop on that console, which gave Microsoft an early advantage even with the Red Ring of Death to become the better value overall. But Sony did have some amazing hitters like Heavy Rain, the Uncharted series, God of War 3, and of course the game that basically helped them win the generation, I would say in my opinion, The Last of Us. And so the rivalry for PlayStation and Xbox was really tight in that generation. But while those two were fighting it out, in the background there was Nintendo. And of course Nintendo ended up doing something very different once again, launching the Nintendo Wii. And this is the console that I would say won the generation. While the other ones were basically fighting for the games and who ended up doing things better, Nintendo decided that they weren't going to play the same game as everybody else. The console wasn't the most powerful thing and it wasn't trying to be. Instead, Nintendo focused on accessibility, motion controls, and making gaming approachable for everyone. The Wii Sports became one of the most, if not the most important games in that generation. People who never touched a controller before suddenly wanted to play. Families got together, friends got together, even grandparents were playing the game. And I think that's what made the Wii special. While the others were trying to divide each other, the Wii was bringing in people together. Then of course entered the 8th generation, and this is when a lot of things started to go wrong, mostly for Microsoft's Xbox and Nintendo's new console, the Wii U. The pressure was on Microsoft on E3, showcasing the Xbox One in 2013, and the reaction for gamers was, I mean, let's just say, not the most pleasant. The entire presentation was focused on TV, entertainment features, and media integrations rather than games. They put all that effort in there and forgot what made the 360 special was their games. And things just got worse with the system's controversial DRM policies, which required the Xbox One to originally require regular online check-ins and restrictions on used games. I mean, I remember seeing people upset everywhere. Even me myself, which basically favored the Xbox 360, was in a sense questioning, why did Microsoft go this route? Why do this? And a lot of us watching that event basically made the decision that if Sony didn't do something like this, we were all going to move there. And well, that's exactly what happened. Sony wasted no time in taking advantage. On its E3, it delivered one of the most memorable console reveals ever, with its price being cheaper than the Xbox One. That's one slap in the face. No constant online requirement. But the biggest one that in a sense ended the console wars when the console didn't even release was Sony's response to sharing games.
This is how you share your games on PS4.
Thanks.
PlayStation.
I mean, and this was just a whole nother level of disrespect. I mean, wow, what a way to win the console generation on the first showing without releasing it. The message was clear. Sony was fully focused on the gamers, and that's what we wanted. More games and a new gen feel. And for Microsoft, if they didn't like how the Xbox One played, their simple answer was to go back to the Xbox 360. Ever since then, Xbox has always been playing catch up now because they just hurt their image so much on that presentation that players just never forgot that. And it's a real shame because they were basically, in a sense, almost #1 on the 360 era. And while Xbox did have Halo 5 Guardians and Gears of War 4, which are fantastic games, I'm sorry, like, I'm a big Xbox person, but Sony killed it with their exclusives. People say game exclusives don't matter. They do. You had Horizon Zero Dawn, Ghost of Tsushima, God of War, Spider-Man, and of course, my favorite, Bloodborne, which, what's going on, Sony? Where's that Bloodborne remake? What's happening here? It didn't take much for Sony to become the #1 console in that generation. And of course, Nintendo had a really rough one, releasing the Nintendo Wii U. The console in itself was really cool. Problem is the marketing. It was just horrible. The entire generation was just geared towards children, and it made the console feel like something that, well, teenagers didn't want, nor adults. It just didn't hit the same as the Wii did. Sales were struggling, and it became one of Nintendo's most difficult times ever in a generation, including with their handheld, the Nintendo 3DS. They were just struggling really badly. They obviously had another Smash game, which was great, and we ended up getting a Wind Waker remaster on that console itself too. And while PlayStation was winning the generation, Xbox was coming back up slowly, introducing new incredible features. In the background, Nintendo was cooking something. At almost the ending point of that generation, the Nintendo Switch launched, and this console became Nintendo's best-selling console of all time. It was a handheld and a home console all in a single device. You can play on your TV, you can play on the go, you can continue playing almost anywhere. It was simple and unique, and while it wasn't anywhere near as powerful as the PlayStation 4 or the Xbox One, Nintendo knew that that wasn't the race anymore. They focused on quality games. And man, did we get them. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, and of course, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. The company went from having one of the biggest failures ever to one of its greatest comebacks of all time. While the PlayStation sold a lot of units and was successful and had more players overall, I would say, I'd give the generation to Nintendo in the end. I mean, it was just amazing. And honestly, as silly as console wars can be, sometimes I don't really think they're ever really gonna go away. As long as there's other companies making different consoles and different games, people are always to compare them. See, competition is what pushes these companies to create better games and better hardware. And again, the most important thing, better experiences for players. And if you guys like these type of videos where we look back at certain eras, movies, games, and just pop culture in general, go ahead and check out the rest of the channel. Have a good one, guys.